Welcome, I'm George Lewis. I represent Arena, a PTC business. For those of you that want to know a little bit about us, we do EQMS, which is electronic quality management for life sciences organizations that have complex devices. So typically, if you're in Series B, C, somewhere in that range, that's oftentimes when organizations would look at using an EQMS solution. If you have any questions, come see us. Happy to talk. So with that, let's kick off the session. We've got a really exciting group and diverse group of individuals here from, venture capital and funding to folks at OEMs and startups as well as consultancies. So before we get into the list of questions here, why don't we go through a quick introduction. Folks, I'd ask for 2 or 3 sentences from each of you. Christophe, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Christophe Sibillin. I'm the CFO of a French startup company called Quantum Surgical that has put to market a device called Appian. Appian is a robotic platform helping interventional radiologists to perform percutaneous ablation. We are raising our B round, and that's also one reason why I'm here to meet with investors.
I'm Alessio Beverina. I'm the founder of Panakes Partner, a VC fund based in Milan, investing in medical device and biotech all over the place in Europe and United States, stage agnostic, pathology agnostic, and that's it.
Rob Hornby, Director at Mercia Ventures. We're a UK-based VC firm. We manage about 2 billion AUM, invest from C through to Series B. Agnostic in terms of what we look at, so medical devices, therapeutics, R&D tools. We'll look at most things if it works for us. Yeah, that's about it.
I'm Angela Paterson. I'm a principal consultant at Compliance Solutions. We are a quality, regulatory and clinical consultancy. We're based in the UK. We have offices in the US and also in Ireland. We mostly work with startups, spin-outs, to help them get to market with whatever limited funding that they have.
Excellent. Well, first off, let me thank everybody for joining us here for the panel. I mean, it's a really exciting group of folks to talk and dig in a little bit more. I think everybody here in the room can learn a little bit. And so with that, why don't we jump right in with the first question here. So the first question is, what approaches have you seen succeed and take products commercial in the US market? Anybody want to jump in on that first softball?
I can start easily. Well, I think that there is no recipe for success.
Sure.
Other than make revenue and building commercial force. Now, let's say that we have more than 20 companies in our portfolio since 10 years now, and we have seen a lot of companies going from the clinical, regulatory, product development, and enter into commercial. And when you enter in commercial, you make a big change in any company, right? So I think that the best approach is, first of all, probably to twinkle a little bit the team, because most of the time, the first team that was able to build up a fantastic product, demonstrate it clinically, and then getting the right approved are not the best one that mentality-wise to build up the commercial force. Engineer, they don't know what is a sales, right? Essentially, I may make a little bit joke, but engineer believe that this product is so good that it's sell by itself. It's not like that. So I first think, for me, first step when you move into the commercial stage, post FDA, post CE mark, is to figure out if internally in your team you have the right resources, also on the CEO role, other than VP sales, VP marketing, etc. Second point, now, if I look at my companies and the 6, 7 that have been starting commercialization, both in Europe, United States, that we have been, all my company have been trying, since there is not a recipe for success, they have been trying to different things, right? We have been trying to use distributor. We have been trying to build up our own force, local force, commercial force. Probably not everywhere in the United States, probably just, let's say, in Florida, in New York State, in California, or we have been using 1099. So a lot of different solutions. And also, we have example of companies that have been partners with big corporates that are the world leader in that particular sector. They pay nice money in upfront payment, potentially minimal guarantee, etc. And they say, I'm going to do the sales for you. So what, at the end of the day, out of these 4 examples that I just did, which one is the most successful? Frankly, I don't know yet, because the distribution with the big corporates may be good, may be wrong. And I haven't seen lots of pitches on top of my portfolio comment. I can tell you that distribution with the big guys is complicated most of the time. Second, the 1099 on distributor, unless you have very, very good that they believe in your product, it's very tough, because the distributor most of the time use your fantastic new technology to open up the door of the hospital, of the center, to sell the standard stuff. Haha. Then, so at the end of the day, probably the best one is to build up your own commercial force, localize, you see, if you don't have money, or go big time. But, in particular, if you go FDA, post-FDA, commercial in the States, well, that the sales price of a sales guy in the States is pretty high, so you need to have enough resources. So you need to raise the 50, 100, 150, depending on the kind of technology that you have and what is the target that you may have in the number of hospitals there. So there is not a recipe.
Sure.
Probably, unfortunately, because of the statistic that has been stated during the last days in this conference, where 10 years ago 50% of the company were acquired pre-commercial. Nowadays is 8%.
Sure.
And essentially cardiovascular. If I summarize a little bit too much, so we need to go commercial. So probably you need to raise tons of money to do the commercialization, which is boring for the investor, in particular the Series A, the SIB, and the Series B. And also for the founder, because they get diluted all the time. So,
Alessio, thank you. So, Robert, I see you smiling.
I think he said it all. He stole it up. Go read. Yeah, exactly. Let's go. No, I'd agree. I mean, from our portfolio, there's no one recipe for success. I think we've seen lots of different things work, and I think it's that balance between the amount of capital you've got and the control over the process. And I think it depends on the technology. If you've got something that is really, really novel, that the market's not seen before, trusting a big distributor to go and do that for you it might work, but it might not work. And we've seen it not work quite a lot of times because the salespeople just don't understand how to sell the technology. It's too hard. They've got other products they can sell that are a much easier sell. So we've seen that fail quite badly. So then, in scenarios like that, maybe there's a case to go and hire people, have your own sales force, have the control over that process. But with that comes the cost of those people. How do you manage those people? Is there a choice? A lot of our companies are, UK born and bred. Does the CEO then need to move to the US and be there, permanently? If that's the choice, it's a big move, and you've got to be committed to that. You can't kind of do half measures, because we've seen, again, some companies try that, not commit to it. You spend a load of money, you don't get any traction, and then you have to pull back. And I think it sets the wrong tone in the market. So again, I think it's just understanding, where does your technology fit in the market? How novel is it? How different is it? Is there a really credible reason why you'd use a big player? Does it fit in their basket? Is it an easy sell for them? In which case, why not do that? But if it isn't, then perhaps go yourself. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a cop out, because there's no, I'm not saying there's a right answer, but there isn't, I don't think.
Thank you. Christophe, Angela, anything to add? I think we've...
Well, maybe in addition to the fact that I agree with pretty much what has been seen on, Quantum and our previous venture at Medtech Surgical, we went direct, but what we've learned over, 15 years of presence between those two companies in the US is that really you need to make whatever it takes to be seen as a US company and to fit the local culture, needs, and really to be reactive and to hear what the market wants. So to do that, you need definitely people who has that experience, but you also, our CEO moved to the US, for example, in the two ventures, at least for 2 years to set up and to manage the setup of the commercial team and service team.
Yep. No, excellent.
I think, as you've said, you can't tackle all of the US all at once. And it's a huge mistake that people in Europe make, because they think they can tackle all of the US, all the States, all at once. That just burns money. They fail. So it's all about key opinion leaders, find them, get them to use the product, get them to promote the product. And then from there, you can, after you've done lots and lots of air miles coming backwards and forwards in Europe yourself, then you can maybe afford that expensive US salesperson. But a lot of companies, the biggest error they make in failing to succeed is trying to do it all at once.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know in one of our conversations we talked about you think state by state because UL was required in some states and not others, so it gets complicated really quick. All right, so let's move on to the next question. And what strategies have you found effective in navigating the regulatory landscape in the U.S.? Robert?
Let's take it. I mean,
Regulatory or reimbursement?
What's that?
Regulatory or reimbursement?
A reimbursement landscape. Thank you, Alessio.
Let's prepare. Yeah.
Better prepare the name. It's part of our due diligence process, I guess, up front, that companies, before we invest, need to have thought about that. We can't go in with some sort of hope and a prayer that something's going to get paid for. So whether that's existing codes are there that they can get paid that route, or they've done a piece of work where there's some kind of precedent that suggests that it is possible to get. Yeah, I guess when we're plugging numbers into a financial model, really, which is what we do when we're sort of thinking, is this going to make a return for us? There needs to be some validity to that revenue line, and so there has to be some thought behind it, whether that's engaging an expert as part of that process up front or just something credible. But it needs to be something that the company's really thought about in some depth. It can't just be, we've got a great technology and it's going to change the world. It's got to be, great technology that's commercially viable as well.
Sure.
Well, if I may add, probably on the reimbursement, first of all, most of the time the company think about it a little bit late, right? Probably one day before the FDA, right? They have fixed the price, they have done market access, understanding where going the patient, the doctors, etc. But they say, well, the technology is useful, blah, blah, blah. They what we want. So I think that if you have the chance and the time and the money, probably starting earlier, that to identify what is, how you can get the right reimbursement in terms of existing code, or how to apply for new code, which is always long-lasting time, is very useful. So my suggestion to any entrepreneur out there is don't wait the last minute in order to go on reimbursement. Try to think about. Second, if existing codes in the States, there are many, so try to find one, or try to also in order to prepare for the reimbursement, to find the right KOL, the right association of patients that are the most demanding one for having your therapy or company therapy out there in the hands of the doctor in order to be supplied to the patient. So work with the right KOL with this sort of influence on the payer. Try to work out on the patient association, in particular in the States. They are super strong, right? So don't forget about that. Finally, there is another thing, that there are technology not necessarily that you get the reimbursement, there are no code, and there is always the out-of-pocket. So we have, for example, one of our portfolio company, which is making serious revenue first year in the States, out-of-pocket, but because the patient need it, and they are happy to pay 3,000, 5,000 euro for such a procedure in order to do it, right? So they will the money. And make an example. There is, in a particular sector that very few people knows about, which is lymphedema. When you have prostate cancer, then Most of the time you have the arm of the leg a little bit bigger. So patient perform 50,000 procedures a year, which are not reimbursed out of pocket. They go for liposuction, and they do 4 times a year, or they go for a major surgery like LVA, lymphovenous anastomosis, which costs in the States 70,000. But since these people are desperate about their condition, which is not just an aesthetical problem, but also a life-threatening problem, they're happy to pay out of pocket 70,000. So if you are able to identify this kind of early adopter that are happy to pay, go for it, while waiting for the reimbursement code to come on board, blah, blah, blah.
Great insights. So I'm going to move us forward to the next question in the interest of time here. How does the regulatory landscape in the U.S. differ from that in Europe, and what impact does it have on the market entry your market entry strategy? So, Angela, you have any thoughts there?
So the first thing really is that we always say US first now, because under MDR regulations in Europe, gaining a CE mark is significantly more expensive than it was under the Medical Device Directive. And it's also significantly more expensive than filing for a 510K. So I've got some numbers here. So if you can apply to be a small business and get a small business decision from FDA, then your fees reduce dramatically. And when I say small business, it's less than $100 million. So it's not really small at all, but that's the rule. So a 510K, for example, if you have the small business decision, is $5,440 versus $21,760, which for startups is a huge amount of money. PMA, and this is really quite critical for PMA, if you're a startup and have a small business decision and this is your first PMA, it's free. So you're saving yourself $120,000, almost $121,000 by going through the pain of getting the small business decision, because it is a pest, but it gets you that first PMA for free. And FDA has timelines, 90 days, 180 days. They don't generally meet it, but it's their target, so they do try. In Europe, one technical file currently is €200,000 for one file, and it'll take them, dependent on what the product is, it can be anything from 3 months to 26 months to get through a notified body. So it's absolute sense to go US first. The other thing which has changed is the IVDR for the in vitro diagnostics. In Europe, it used to be that 90% of in vitro diagnostics were self-certified. The rules have now changed, and now 90% will be certified. So they've gone from a cost of approximately $400 to a cost of $120,000 for one IVD. So again, US first makes sense.
Excellent. Chris, I saw you shaking your head. Anything to add there?
No, I mean, we've made the decision to, when we set up the company back in 2017, to opt for the MDR regulation first. And we were one of the first company to receive a CE mark under the new regulation, even though it took our notified body about 8 months from the final audit to issue the certificate. And that was just administrative burden. I like more the idea of the FDA, where it's predictable. So you know what to do. And in addition, we usually do a Q-sub. So we have the occasion to talk with FDA teams to really get the file prepared in the best way possible.
I think this is probably the reason why you need to go to the FDA. Other than the fact that the FDA, it's American market, it's the largest market, blah, blah. And then they say that it's in the States because they are more innovative, blah, blah, blah. I know, this is the FDA stuff. It's the most important part. You have a discussion. And you can do how many Q-sub you want, right? You try while you discuss it, then while with the notified body, it's just submission. There is not the consultancy piece, which is extremely useful, in particular in small startups where, you know, everything is unknown. Or well, we need to do this kind of study on animal or biocompatibility, blah, blah, blah. So this is the reason why I think that compared to 20 years ago, where companies from the States were coming to Europe,
There's a Swift.
now, you know, all my company that start, you know, all the companies that come to my desk and say, I have a plan to see Mark, start a revenue generation in Europe. They're okay. The word about FDA. And some of them, when I invested it, we cancel, completed the C mark, and we go to the States. Because at the end of the day, our job is to get money back, selling the company. And I tell you, you know, big corporates are becoming even later than before in terms of acquisition, and they don't care if you have 10 million in revenue in Europe. They want to have 10 million or plus in the States. So better you do probably spend more in the States to get the FDA instead of CE mark, but the return on investment, I think, is much valued.
Yeah, but I'd agree. I mean, we, I suppose, advise all our portfolio against the US first. I think it's a matter of time and capital constraints. And if you go to the EU, it's going to take you a lot longer and there's less certainty through the process. So you don't really know what you're aiming for. So that, say, iteration, being able to speak to people that, you know, they're not going to tell you exactly what you need to do, but they can tell you if your plan looks a bit off, and it's just a lot quicker. It's just a no-brainer for me, really.
Excellent. So we've talked about regulatory a little bit. Let's pivot to economics a little bit. What are some of the differences you see between the US market and the European market? And we've touched on it a little bit so far, but anything you want to jump in there on?
Well, I mean, for our portfolio, so a lot of our focus is on the UK. So we're dealing with the NHS, we're dealing with cost pressures, a system that doesn't really work that well at the moment, sadly. So the mindset you're going in with when you're trying to sell is, how can we bring costs down? How can we sort of bring the administrative burden down? How can we, you know, make things more efficient? The mindset, you know, when we've sent companies to the US is almost the reversal of that, of, you know, how can we make more money? How can we sort of generate revenue? It's more commercial, you know, from what we see, which is, it makes sense. It's very logical. But I think when you come from the mindset of dealing with the NHS, which is a very different system, flipping an entrepreneur's mindset from that to going, no, this is actually about making money. It's not about sort of improving a process, or, you know, clinical outcomes still matter, but it's not the only thing that matters. So it's a mindset change, which I think is not easy sometimes for our portfolio.
Anyone want to jump in and add?
No. Well, I can add a few things still. There is a mentality difference between American and European. Americans are more open to innovation. Not talking about the doctors, don't take me wrong. European doctors are amazing. So they like to test new things, to try new things, etc. I'm talking about the chief purchasing officer at the hospital level and all the management at the hospital level, which is private or public, who cares? They are more willing to buy new things and take the risk on new things because the KOL stress them so much and they need to buy. So this innovation mindset allow to grow revenue faster. So I had one of my portfolio company that for 2 years to try to make revenue in Europe. After 2 years, they made 1 million. Then we got FDA, and in less than 9 months, we go to 10. Okay,
Wow.
That's, you know, answer your, we had 6 people in Europe running, we have 6 people running in the States. So it's not a question of people that you put there, but it's mindset, people are happy. Second, I think that, you know, coming back to Rob's point of view, you know, our healthcare system in Italy, in France, in UK, in another country, is a little bit broken on the public sector. So everything is priced down. Now, try to sell a robot in any of this country, well, you know, good luck. Where you find the 4 million, the 2 million, the 1 million, the cost of the robot. Cheers. So you need to be a little bit more inventive there. So in the United States, they are so flexible. Well, first, there is tons of cash available, foundation, many different endowment, lots of money that gives to the hospitals to buy new things to treat the patient. Remember, the objective is to make money on the hospital side, but also to treat the patient and make everybody happy. So I think that the United States, there is this advantage. I would like to say that probably in the States, an American company and our portfolio company that are targeting American companies have been smart enough to find models, right? Okay, you need to sell, what's your cost of your robot? 1 million, let's say 1 million. It's not true, right? It's open less.
Yeah, price list is 1.1.
Okay, 1.1 million. So well, you need to find in the budget 1.1 million, right? And you're fighting with the DV5, the Da Vinci 5, which is entering now in the market that everybody wants because it's the iPhone 16, right? Of the robot, surgical robotic. So you need to find a way to find this money. The hospital may not have it, so you need to find economic model in order to find this money at the place of the hospital. So I'm sure you know better than me because you are a CFO and you're selling a robot, so I'm sure that happy to understand. But we have rent to buy, lease, and we give the hospital already the lease, right? We have paper procedure. You need to be smart enough in order to solve the issue. And in the States, they get it, right? They say the first meeting, I don't have the money till Q1 next year. They say, well, why if we do something different? Let a lease or rent to buy, 90 days trials, whatever, in order to make it happen. So you may find in Europe, oh, it's capital equipment, 1 million, I don't have the money. We do a lease.
Yeah.
No, I still believe that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
But conversely to what I've just said before, some of our portfolio companies, what they found is the UK and parts of Europe are actually very good on innovation budgets. They're not very good to commercialize in the long term, but there are pots of capital out there, depending on your regulatory route, where actually it's really good to sort of trial your products. It's great, sort of, some good clinicians out there, go and test it, go and make the mistakes in that market, let surgeons break it, fix it, and then go to the US and commercialize properly because you don't want to make those mistakes there because that's where you kill your product. So I think there are good things about, this side of the Atlantic, but it is definitely more challenging kind of in the long-term commercial.
Excellent. Let's move on to the next question. So how should an organization approach staffing for the US market? Angela, I know you're thinking about this now.
I think
Do you think to kick us off?
initially for startups coming from Europe, they usually try to do everything themselves
Sure.
for the simple reason that employment in the US is expensive compared to in the UK and Europe. So they will try to succeed by themselves for as long as they possibly can. Like I said before, racking up the air miles backwards and forwards for sometimes years. And then once they get some traction, they start to employ the US people, then open a US office. I've seen it done the other way where people try and open up a US office first, and then it's just an address with no one in it because they can't afford to put anyone in it. But that's how I've always seen it done. It seems to work pretty well.
Chris, I know you have a lot of experience with this.
Yes, well, in both, for the US market, we twice went the direction to get with industry veterans coming from big corporation. It was still the appetite for innovation, and that was definitely expensive. But for us, that was definitely more expensive than we originally planned. But it paid off. It paid off in the sense that we had a quicker access to the market. And we were lucky enough to find a good person. That's not all the time the case. We had good and bad experience, but overall speaking, we were successful.
Great. I think that the key is to hire the good first guy in the States, right? Because if you are the first, let's say the CEO of the United States, if your company is European, and potentially one with the commercial mentality, and if you choose the right guy, the first one, he has probably the network or the capacity to identify additional people on his team that works below him in order to make all the stuff. In my robotic company, we are an American CEO. As soon as the product was ready to commercialize, at least in Europe, was an American individual. He spent 2 years in Italy, enjoying Tuscany. It's the worst place to stand an American. And as soon as we were almost ready there to get the FDA, let's say 6 months, the guy decided to go to the States. We even moved the headquarters there. We open up the office, the facility where we have a demo lab, etc. And we build up 50 people in the States with clinical affairs, clinical specialists, CEO, VP marketing, etc. Because frankly, a VP marketing in Italy is not as good as VP marketing in the States. The VP says, coming from Italy, even if we are super good seller, we can sell everything. American mentality towards American target clients, it's completely different. So better you choose and go big time. And unfortunately, as you say, it's expensive. I think it's worth it.
It is
right?
worth it.
If you choose the right people. But I think the team is fundamental. Even in the other my company that I told before that went rapidly from 0 to 10 in less than 9 months, right? We are an amazing CEO that was in the business for forever. And in this particular segment, he knows everyone. So bam, 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 bam. He are 7 people like that without using a headhunter because he knew all of these people, right? So, and now his clients are the previous clients that he was selling to. So it's extremely easy. You don't want to build up from Europe, everything from scratch, or even sending your fantastic Italian or French or British CEO to the States because they don't understand him, right? It's a different kind of mentality, right? So I'm sure that I see American people down there, they know what is the major difference and they can understand. So I think that first guy that you put, spend money in identifying him with the right headhunter that is good at understanding what is his capacity, the sales guy, not on the CV, because on the CV, any CV of a sales guy is fantastic, right? Because it's part of the sales capacity to sell themselves. But anyway.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. We've seen it work with, I guess UK CEOs going over there, European CEOs going over. I think there's a balance. Those individuals might have had a track record of having done something in the US before, but I think they're very bought into the idea. So I think if you're going to hire someone to represent your company in the US or lead that company, they've got to be incentivized in the right way because, it can't be something that's a very transactional relationship where they, find it hard to sell it and they disappear the next day. So I think it's the right approach for the company, but I think that whoever goes there, whether it be the founding CEO or someone you hire, they need to be bought into the idea. But I think you need a presence there because it's not going to happen on its own. But I think the way we approach things more generally is the board has to change as you expand to the US. I think the mentality shift is, you need to start thinking about, I guess, exit. Who are those relationships that you need to build to sort of secure that strategic exit? Is your fundraising journey going to change? Is it going to be a different set of funders that come on board at that point? Are we the right funders to fund the US growth round? Probably not. So bring those people on board that kind of have the network and start sort of changing the people around the table. But you can kind of do it gradually over time, but that's probably more in like non-exec positions. But I think it's not just the execs that needs to change. It needs to be just a wholesale shift in kind of who sits around that team.
That's great. Those are great insights, folks. It's wonderful. So we don't have that much time remaining. I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for the final question. So I think it kind of wraps things up a little bit. And so, what are your thoughts on what organizations need to accomplish to achieve a successful exit in the US? Big, wide open question. Chris, let's start with you.
Say what you're going to do what you say you will be doing, be crystal clear and sharp on execution, talk to corporate, make them aware of the progress you make in the US market, and let people know the good things you're doing.
Excellent. Angela, what have you seen?
I think the KOLs is absolutely critical. You get the right KOLs, they start to talk on your behalf, they go on podiums, they talk about your product, they introduce some other people to also buy your product. And that's how I've seen traction gained quickly, is from that. The other side is you get some young surgeons who are really interested and are desperate to get on podiums, desperate to talk. Sometimes those guys are almost as good. They might not have the name, but they're willing to work for you. And those are the ways that I've seen products really gain traction and get the interest of the bigger med dev companies that would be the people that would buy you out.
I think for me, it's just that continual clarification of what are you aiming for? What is that exit point? Because I think the thing we've seen with our portfolio is that those goalposts have massively shifted, you know, not only at exit, but later stage funding rounds. And you sort of, the assumption you went in with in terms of, you know, maybe when you raise the growth round, when you get off the boat, they've shifted back by 5 years or something like that. So that I think you need to be having those conversations on an ongoing basis just to recalibrate where you are. And it can't be surprised that, you know, suddenly you go and speak to someone that you spoke to 5 years ago and they're like, oh no, we only invest now when you've got 20 million of revenue instead of, you know, pre-revenue or something like that. So just keep those conversations going.
Alessio, you want to bring it home for us?
So, unfortunately, as the data shown by some banker lately say that 10 years ago, 50% of the company were acquired pre-commercial, and now it's 8%. So there is just one recipe to get an exit in most of the sector in the medtech is to go and grow revenue. Okay, top line revenue demonstrated that there is usability of your device in different hospitals, not necessarily capital. In the case of robot, you may place 10 robots, but demonstrate that these 10 robots are used every day, 2, 3, 4 times a day if it's possible.
Adoption.
It's a question of utilization rate. So then it depends. You know, the KOL point is very important because we all know that big guys listen to the young or relatively old KOL, and they use them as a reference. So be sure that the right KOL that are in bed with the big corporate knows about you. Okay, this is a very good point. But again, you know, you need to grow revenue top line and be sure that your stuff is not just acquired by an hospital, but actually used. You know, there are many companies that sold devices that are some in the corridor taking dust. You know, be sure that, you know, because at the end of the day, when the acquirer is looking at you, is looking at the revenue, structure, technology. If I may add one point, try to make a pain for these corporates. If you're, you know, even with 20 million revenue, and if you're grabbing market share from them, good point. If all the KOL are talking about the new kids on the block and not about their old basic technology, it's a good point. So try to make a pain point on the corporates. And if the pain is larger, it take them potentially, you start in California, you get 10% of market share on their own market, they will notice, right? This is a pain point. So they will say, oh, what is this company? What they're doing? So be sure that you tackle a pain point. Second point, remember, when you're discussing with them, the corporates, as Rob was saying, be sure that you have a complementary product to their portfolio or alternative much better. You know, remember, a corporate that has a product that is making money, you know, it has been, it's cash cow, as they call it, right? So they don't give up their cash cow just because you have a fancy new stuff. So be sure that it's better, it's complementary, something similar, but not the replacement of their product. Otherwise, they will buy you in order to close you down, or which happened.
Folks, thank you. We're already out of time. That's amazing that 45 minutes or so, maybe it was 40 minutes, went by so quickly. There's a lot of wisdom packed on a small amount of space there. So thanks to each of you for spending your time with all of us here today. And with that, let's give everybody, let's give them a round of applause.